Hey everyone, how's it going? What am I working on now? Well, I got that Kia Sorento and it's got the cracked oil pan. So I got it up on a lift. I'm going to be changing oil pan. Well, what's step one? I got to drain the oil. I took the cap off already. You always got to make sure you have a way to put oil in it. Regardless, you got to always make sure the hood opens, stuff like that, which I already knew that, but I did it anyway. Just, it's force of habit, so it's a good thing to be into. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to change this oil pan. What we got to do, see, now it's just been on a lift for a minute, and we already got spots on the floor, and we already have drips starting. So basically, I'm going to take the drain plug out, let this thing drain as much as possible. It looks like a pretty clear-cut, reasonably easy pan. The worst part is probably going to be this bracket, because you got to take this bracket off. This bracket is the lower AC bracket, but I think if I just take these two bolts out and take the bolts out that hold this bracket to the pan, or like sandwich the pan into the rest of the block, or unless it's got an upper pan. Yeah, it's got an upper pan. That's called an upper pan. Sandwiches the pan to the upper pan. I think this thing will slide right out, but we're gonna find out. So let me pull the drain plug out and let's let it drain. I got a few other things I'm in the middle of. So we're gonna do that, let it sit for a little while, let it drip as much as possible, and then go from there. So now that the oil's all drained out, I'm not going to go through this whole thing with you, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. So up under here, I'm going to take these two bolts out that hold the compressor to this bracket. And as you see, the bracket is notched, so it should slide down. Then I have that 12 there, that 12 up in that hole, and then those two 12s around the corner. Let me get those out first, because then the rest of them are all 10s. This should be a reasonably simple job. We are doing an oil change too. We'll be changing the filter in that. As you can see, even though I put the drain plug back in, it's still dripping out some because obviously you have oil that's residual and it's dripping down inside the pan, so it's running where the crack is and it's collecting. So, all right, let me get those out. As soon as I took the bolts out, the bracket fell out. So it's got two oddball bolts right there. I don't know what the reason for those are. There's like 12 points in it, but then all the other ones appear to be just 10s. So let me get all of those out, and then we're going to separate this pan, lower pan from the upper pan. Oh, you know what? Those are longer bolts, probably, because see that big bolt right there? That's for the lower pan up to the up to the block, or the upper pan up to the block. So these go through the oil pan and on through the upper pan into the block. So that's the reason for that. I don't think that made a lot of sense, but I think you understand what I mean. So with all the bolts out, now I got to try to separate the pan. Usually what I do is I take like a, as you see, like this paint scraper, and I try to whack it in between if I can. Sometimes you can't. Just becomes too much of a trouble, too much of a problem. I actually have one bolt left in the front here that I left in on purpose. Now what I'm going to try to do, I have to use a headlight. I apologize if that affects your vision, the quality of the video. I mean, I am replacing the pan, so I don't care all that much if I distort this one. So there, I hope you can see what's happening. Be careful when you do stuff like this too, because when you do this, you can nick the gasket surface. Although this uses silicone, so it's not as terrible as something that uses a regular gasket. This is quite tough, I will give it that. All right, we're going to try. Now that I have like a lip and edge there, maybe I might be able to get this in place. also be careful when you're doing this because you don't know what's on the other side of the pan. You know, do you have sensors in there of any sort, a tone wheel? Do you have anything like that that you can damage by doing this? So it's always something to be mindful of, that you got to be careful. All right, that's fighting me. So we're going to try old trick number 2. If I can find what I'm looking for. Hang on one second. All right, so old trick number 2. Torch. I'm guessing you can see what I'm doing now. A lot of times a torch will help release the tension of the fluid. Just like that. Just like that. Okay. Now obviously you want to be careful because now you're dealing with a hot surface. Now the motor itself was cold. Just still, you got to be careful. It cools off reasonably fast. Yeah, it's hot still. Whenever you're using a torch, you got to be really careful so you don't catch anything on fire or hurt anything, possibly ruin the belt that's on there, stuff like that. All right. So here, still hot. About the old oil. I hate doing oil pans or any kind of work that requires the removal of an oil pan because then you get oil dripping on everything for quite a period of time. I think what I'll do is let me get this out from underneath here because I'm about to get oil dripping on my camera. I think I just did, didn't I? I don't know. So with the pan off, all I'm going to do is clean off the gasket surface there, just get all that old silicone off. And then we have a new pan here. We're going to put that on. Let me get that one clean. Let me get all of that cleaned off. I'm going to show you the old pan. Let's see if we can't see the crack on the inside. I didn't even look at it yet. I just have it upside down in another drain pan. But let me get this cleaned off real quick. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, I got the gasket surface all cleaned off. Basically just razor blade and a rag and some brake clean. I'm going to use this caulk gun with Ultra Gray or a TV. And then all I do, put a thin layer. So hold on a second, that's actually a globbed up end. Just a thin layer. And here too, just like tightening up stuff, you don't have to go bananas. You don't have to use this entire tube on here when you're doing this. And just like this, all the way across. This is all I do. All the way to the end. See, I boogered it up a little bit there. It doesn't really matter. And the reason it doesn't really matter is because when you install this, you squish it in place. So I just wipe off a little bit of that excess that's hanging off the edge. But you want to make sure that you have what appears to be like a good level amount all the way across. So now I'm going to install this up in place. Not sure if you're going to be able to watch it or not. Let's see. Got to get my other tripod here so you can actually, so I can get you up higher. Let's see. Use a light. I don't know if that'll help at all. Does that add anything for you? I can't tell. All right. Now, like I said, I already wiped everything down. I'm going to give it one last quick wipe because, of course, you get some dribbles of oil that come across and into your pan rail area. I don't use a Scotch-Brite on these. I just basically, like I said, use a razor blade. And a razor blade and a rag just to clean it off as best as it'll come out. And I get ready with 2 of the bolts that are going to go up in there. There and one on this end here. This way it'll hold everything up in place. All right, so now let's get the rest of the bolts in place. All the 10s first. I'm going to put all the bolts in place first, including the ones that go through that bracket. I'm just going to set them in place. And the reason being is because I got to tighten up the pan first, then put the bracket on. What if I tightened up the pan and one of those holes or 2 of those holes were slightly off? Then I'm going to be fighting with it to put that bracket in place. This, sorry. doing first is I'm catching all the 10 millimeter headed bolts. And it's the head of the bolt that's 10 millimeters. It's not that the bolt itself is a 10 millimeter bolt. An actual 10 millimeter bolt is a big bolt. And like I've said in the past, you want to put them in, get all the bolts caught first, because if you don't, you're going to be fighting yourself later. Just had some drips on the floor I had to wipe up. I can almost guarantee it. I can't say for sure that you definitely will, but 99 times out of 100, you'll be fighting yourself later on. Even if you put all the bolts in and left one out for whatever reason, and then went to go put that one in, seems like every time you're going to fight it. Just how things work out. Hearing a chime going off, but I don't know what it is. Very intermittent chime. So now 2 of these big ones are going to go. Yep. Now those with the funky head on them, those were 12 millimeter 12 points. Actually, let me change to that. It's just a 12 point, 12 millimeter socket. There's nothing special about it. And these are those bracket bolts, and we'll put them in place too. Like I said, I want to make sure that everything's going to go in when I put that bracket in. If I don't do it now, I'm going to be fighting with myself later. You see that one, I actually had to move the pan slightly. I know you probably can't see what I'm doing, but you get the general idea of it. So that's all the bolts. I'm going to use a slightly weaker battery pack that I have here for these 10s. And no, I'm not going to torque them. So that's all in. So now I'm going to tighten up those two long 12s that go in. Now these two, I'm actually going to hit with a ratchet. I'm taking those bracket bolts out. Take those out. Let me go get a rag. Hang on a second. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put this front bracket in place. Let me move this light. Maybe does that help at all? Probably not. I don't know if there's any good spot to actually put this thing. Maybe there? Maybe. So now this, oh wait, I forgot to actually put a wrench on, or a ratchet on these two longer bolts. That's all. You don't have to go bananas. All right. So now this bracket goes up in place. It's got a little window here. Put the one bolt in. Just bring it down snug with your fingers. And catch the others. And now we can tighten those. As you can hear, the pan was slightly off on that one, but it went in fine. Now we're going to catch these bolts here. All right. Now this one came out tight from the beginning. This one came out with my fingers. Never use the gear inside to tighten it up. Alright, that's pretty much it. And you can see the squish of the silicone is pretty darn good. See that? So I am perfectly happy with that. All right, I know I got a compressor running. Basically, I'm just gonna change the filter. Verify that your drain plug is tight. Just because it came like that doesn't mean it's tight. Verify it's actually tight, which I'm gonna do that. And I gotta put that lower shield back on. Remember the one that was leaking oil? I had actually put it into a drain because we have transmission rebuild benches. So I had actually stuck it up in one for the last, whatever it's been, 4 days. So it was able to drip out pretty good. So yeah, let me get this finished. And no, the drain plug was not tight. So I did tighten it up. Real quick, actually, let me show you the pan that I took off. And it's very hard to see from the inside. But if you look down at the bottom corner there, see the crack running along the edge there? See that? It's there. So is it from somebody over tightening it? Who knows? Oh, and that trick with the torch where I went on that, what it's doing is it's obviously burning the silicone. So, you know, it burns up the silicone, helps free it up. I used to be able to use, we don't have an oxyacetylene torch here because we hardly ever do that type of work where we need it. So the little MAP gas torch is good enough. I could have gotten it hotter and it would have made it easier to come off, but anyway. All right, let me change the filter and let's get this thing done. So I just filled the oil. I put the pan back on, the shield back on underneath, so that's all set. Now, I don't know if you noticed, I didn't pull the dipstick out. I usually do. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. If it's a situation where you didn't pull the dipstick out, you really should, first off. But if you didn't, let's say, when you come underneath the hood, do this. Pull the dipstick out and just check it, make sure. The reason being is because I've seen people, this people being one of them, when he was a novice, I've seen it get pinched. It'll actually, when you put the pan up, pinch the dipstick in place. One real disaster that I created, and yes, it was my fault, I was doing a valve body on a Chrysler 604 transmission, and I left the dipstick in, and I caught the dipstick between the case and the valve body. Destroyed the tranny because it actually left a dimple in there. I'm sure somebody could have fixed it, but at the dealership we're not about that. We're gonna send it out and worry about getting another car in. We're about volume. But yeah, so when I went to go put fluid in, I went to go pull the stick out and I couldn't get the stick out because it was sandwiched in between there and I didn't realize it. So, but I was a novice, like I said. And this was probably 1989, like when the 604 or Slip 04, like we used to call them, when they first came out, is when I did it. But yeah, so just a lesson learned. But that's pretty much going to end this. Let me, I got to wash up, so then I can start this up. I'm going to put it back up in the air, and I'm going to recheck everything. And I think I did mention that the drain plug was actually loose, so I did tighten it up. So let me wash up, and then we're going to start this, because then we still got to verify the oil level, because it's going to take a little more oil than it did before. Because usually when you change oil, a lot of times there's a quarter of a quart or better at the very bottom of the pan. People don't realize that, so they know, oh, well, you know, it calls for 4.5 quarts. I put 4.5 quarts in, it's perfect. Well, guess what? Now it's going to take 5. So I'm not quite sure what it's going to take, so I got to verify that. All right, let's start it up. Okay, no oil light, no nothing like that, so we're all good there. All right, let's put it up in the air and check it while it's running. All right, up in the air, not much to see, as you can tell, because the shield's in place. But I mean, I could see through a little hole here. I guess I could drop down this one here and just take a look. All right, and there you go. It's clean, it's dry. You can actually see the paint mark, how much I moved the drain plug. See that? They had actually paint marked it from the factory. So, yeah, I'm confident in my work, so I wasn't too concerned. Because I'm sure some of you are like, well, why'd you bother putting the cover on if you're still going to check it? I'm pretty confident in my work. I was just going to take a quick glance, that's all. But yeah, so I'm good with that. I'm happy with that. All right, let me just tighten the shield back up, and we're going to put it outside. We're going to still verify the oil level. Okay, so I just pulled the stick. I wiped it down. And still need about another half a quart or so. So that was 5 quarts that I put in. That's what it calls for, and this is what I'm talking about. When you're changing a pan or doing any kind of internal motor work like that, especially on the lower end, you're going to wind up needing more oil than you think you are. So let me just top this off, and then we're going to be good to go. Actually, technically, I can end it right there. Just all I got to do is add the oil to it. All right, so hopefully you got something out of that. If you did, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching.